Virgo, what does the universe do to those who hurt you? The revelation that will bring you peace. You think you've already gotten over it, that the moment when someone hurt you is behind you, filed away, resolved. You smile when someone asks, saying you don't think about it anymore, that you've moved on. But there's a part of you deep down that never closed that chapter. A part that still adds up, still registers, still waits for the day when the accounts will finally balance. Pay attention to your own body the next time that person's name pops into your head out of nowhere. A tightness in your chest that arrives before any conscious thought. A chill in your stomach that you didn't invite. This isn't a memory. It's an instrument within you, calibrated to detect any aftershock, even years after the original tremor has passed. There's a seismograph installed somewhere in your mind. It never rests. It draws thin lines on invisible paper every time something remotely resembling that old pain approaches. A comment from a stranger, a scene in a movie, a phrase spoken in the wrong tone by someone who doesn't even know your story. And the device records, even when there's absolutely no real tremor happening in the present. You were taught to call it caution, emotional intelligence, learning from the past so as not to repeat the same mistakes. And in part, that's true. But there's a fine line between learning from pain and living in it, revisiting the same moment repeatedly, as if each new analysis would finally bring a different answer than the previous one. Because that's what you do, isn't it? You analyze. You've always analyzed. From a very young age, your mind learned that understanding a situation was the only way to protect yourself from it. If you understood exactly why it happened, perhaps you could prevent it from happening again. So you became a kind of archivist of your own pain, keeping dates, exact phrases, the tone of voice, the expression on the face of the person who hurt you, as if you were gathering evidence for a trial that, deep down, you know may never happen. The file grows, folder upon folder, each one catalogued with almost surgical precision. You remember what was said on that specific day, 8 years ago, with a clarity that even frightens you. You remember the silence that followed, the way no one apologized, the way you kept moving on because it seemed like the mature thing to do. But the file didn't close. It was just stored in a deeper drawer, waiting. And here's the question no one ever asked you. For whom, exactly, is this file being kept? Who will come to consult this evidence? Who will read this meticulously documented process and finally say that you were right all along? You tell yourself that you're waiting for the universe to act, that there's a kind of cosmic balance, an unwritten law that ensures that those who do wrong will, sooner or later, receive it back. And you hold on to this belief tightly because it's the only thing that makes sense in the face of pain that otherwise would seem completely gratuitous, without any purpose. If the universe is going to collect this debt, then at least your pain had a meaning. At least you didn't suffer for nothing. But calmly consider what you're doing while waiting for this debt to be served. You're not resting, confident that justice will prevail. You're on standby, watching over a court that may not even exist, reviewing the same case file exhaustively. And if no one ever reads this file besides yourself, what would that say about who really is responsible, on duty, watching over a case that may never be reopened by anyone but yourself? It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose isn't about waiting for the universe to judge those who hurt you. It's about a much rarer mindset, that of returning to yourself the authority you unknowingly surrendered to a process that never had a judgment deadline. For Virgo, who builds clarity by analyzing everything around them, this book presents the only type of analysis that truly liberates, the inward-looking kind, without the impossible demand to be perfect, even in the evidence we hold against others. You're still processing what you just heard, Perhaps something inside your chest tightened as you recognized your own file, your own vigilance, your own habit of keeping score that no one else is counting. This discomfort you feel now is not a sign to postpone. It's precisely the sign that something within you is ready to stop watching and finally begin to break free. The link is in the first pinned comment. But be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And in the meantime, tell me in the comments, what's the oldest grudge you still keep filed away, hoping that someone will finally read it someday? There's a specific kind of silence that only those who carry an old grudge truly understand. Not the silence of someone who has forgotten, but the silence of someone who has learned to live with the inner noise without letting it show on the outside. You master this silence like few others. You smile at the right moment, participate in the conversation, follow the routine while a part of you continues in the background, leafing through the same process, searching for something you haven't yet found. There's a scene that repeats itself without you realizing it every time you revisit the hurt. You put yourself in the position of the investigator. You gather evidence, cross-reference dates, try to understand exactly what went through the mind of the person who hurt you. You do this with almost professional dedication, as if you were the only person qualified to solve this case, and for a long time it works. You feel in control. You feel you are closer to an answer. But there comes a moment, and it arrives unannounced, when you realize something is too uncomfortable to ignore. You're no longer investigating what the other person did. You're investigating why, after so much time, you still haven't been able to let it go. The question shifts without asking permission. It stops being, "Why did she do that?" and becomes, "Why am I still here dealing with this?" It's as if you were the detective who spends years chasing a single suspect, convinced that solving the case will bring relief, until the moment you examine the fingerprints collected at the scene and recognize your own hands there. Not because you are guilty of what you suffered, but because your lingering presence in that case, your excessive care in keeping it alive, leaves your signature on every page. What if the person you've been investigating the most all this time wasn't the one who hurt you, but the version of yourself that refuses to close the file? Think about how many times you've reconstructed that scene in your head. You change the angles, review the details, imagine different versions of the same conversation, as if a new order of words could change the final outcome. This isn't weakness. It's your mind trying to do what it's always done best. Find a pattern, an explanation, a logic that brings relief. Only this time, the pattern you most need to find isn't in the other person. It's in the reason why you keep returning to the scene of the crime, alone, flashlight in hand, even after years. There is a silent belief that Virgo carries, almost like a dogma never spoken aloud, that there is a precise cosmic mechanism, a giant gear turning behind the scenes of the universe, ensuring that every mistake is corrected. Every cruelty has an equivalent consequence. Imagine this mechanism as a watchmaker bent over a workbench, adjusting tiny parts with infinite patience, constructing the exact moment when the person who hurt you will feel in their own skin the weight of what they caused. And you wait. You adjust your own internal gears in sync with this imaginary clock, as if your vigilance were a necessary part of the mechanism, but this clock never ticks. The hours pass, the years pass, and the person who hurt you continues living, often without even remembering what they did. Meanwhile, you remain there, hunched over your own workbench, adjusting a mechanism that was never yours to fix. What if the clock you've been waiting for never existed to tell someone else's time, but rather all along to tell yours? There's something particularly cruel about this waiting. It demands that you keep one foot in the past, alert to any sign that the gears have finally turned, A comment from someone saying that life has caught up with the person who hurt you. Any news item that seemed to confirm that the universe, after all, was indeed paying attention. You cling to these fragments as proof that your waiting wasn't in vain, without realizing that continuing to need this proof is, in itself, a way of never leaving the place where the pain happened. There's something almost ironic about this. You, who value logic, evidence, and self-sustaining reasoning so much, have accepted without question one of the least provable beliefs that exist, that there's an automatic cosmic compensation system working behind the scenes, ensuring that everything balances out in the end. You would never accept this fragile logic in any other area of life. But when it comes to one's own pain, even the most analytical mind allows itself to believe in what alleviates it, even without proof. Maintaining this vigilance comes at a cost that no one warned you about. There's a dam inside you, built stone by stone over the years, to contain everything you've decided not to let overflow. The anger that would seem disproportionate, the sadness that would seem like weakness, the simple human desire to scream that it hurt deeply. You built this dam with such skill that no one, not even yourself, realizes the daily effort required to keep it standing. But every dam feels the weight of the water it holds back, and the longer it goes on, the heavier it becomes to maintain that containment. The more energy is spent just to prevent leaks, to keep the surface appearing calm. That's not serenity. It's containment disguised as peace. What would happen if, just for a moment, you let the river flow, not to flood everything around it, but simply to stop wasting so much energy holding back what has long been begging to follow its natural course? There's a huge difference between destroying everything around you and simply allowing the water to find its own path, wider, slower, without the urgency of an explosion. Nobody ever taught you that this middle ground exists, because the world usually presents only two extremes, keeping everything silent or exploding all at once. But real dams, the ones that survive for decades, have floodgates, controlled relief points designed precisely so that the pressure never reaches the point of breaking the entire structure. Holding on to this water for longer takes its toll, accumulating silently, and perhaps that's precisely why so many people who identify with Virgo feel a nameless exhaustion, a depletion that doesn't stem from what happened, but from everything spent holding on to what happened in its proper place. It was with this specific type of exhaustion in mind that the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose presents a practical way to alleviate this dam without breaking anything important. A way to release it gradually, with discernment, instead of holding everything in until you can't take it anymore and explode uncontrollably. This type of discernment is rare, and for that very reason, it's usually only available for a short time. The last copies are running out, and this kind of clarity shouldn't wait another day. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's a question you may never have allowed yourself to ask. Who would you be if you stopped being the person who was wronged? Not the one who overcame the injustice, the one who simply no longer needs to carry it as part of their identity. For many people born under this sign, resentment becomes, over time, a kind of test of character. If you suffered so much and still remained whole, analytical, and correct, then the pain became part of what proves your worth. That's why letting go of this resentment feels, strangely, like a loss, not a relief. Imagine an extremely competent surgeon, capable of operating on any patient with impeccable precision, who discovers too late that the most urgent tumor in the room is her own. She hesitates, not because she lacks skill, but because removing it means admitting that part of who she thought she was depended precisely on what needs to be cut away. There's a difference between remembering pain and needing it to feel whole. The first is memory. The second is a kind of invisible scaffolding built so long ago that it already seems part of the original structure, when in reality it was just temporary support that you forgot to remove after construction was finished. Removing this scaffolding is scary because for a moment it feels like everything is going to collapse. But what collapses most of the time is just the facade you used to justify so much vigilance. Cutting away that identity isn't easy, and no one should pretend it is. But perhaps that's precisely why tools for real clarity matter so much at this specific moment. And that's what a part of the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose is dedicated to. Surgically separating who you are from everything that only hurt you. This kind of discernment isn't a luxury, it's urgent, and access to it may not last. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. After the dam is released, after the most difficult surgery is performed, one last question remains, perhaps the most silent of all. Where should this energy, previously used for surveillance, archiving, investigation, and containment, now be directed? Imagine a compass stuck for years near a magnet too powerful to ignore. It points in the direction of the magnet, convinced that this is the true north, because it is the only force it can feel with such intensity. Only when it is moved away from this proximity does the needle tremble, hesitate, and return, on its own, to pointing where it should always have pointed. For years, that old resentment acted like a magnet, so intense, so ever-present, that it seemed impossible for any other direction to exist. But it always did. And when you finally step away from the magnetic field of that specific pain, you discover that your attention, that same fine, careful attention, capable of perceiving every detail, can point toward building, not just vigilance. What if true north was never pointing towards the person who hurt you, but in the exact opposite direction, waiting all along for you to stop looking back? Perhaps you've already felt this in fleeting moments, a project that completely absorbed you, an entire afternoon dedicated to something that demanded your meticulous attention, leaving no room to revisit old grievances. In those rare moments, you weren't watching anyone anymore. You were simply being yourself in your sharpest, most present version. The question remains, why do these moments seem like the exception when they could be the rule? This reallocation of energy is rare, and few people achieve it alone, because no one teaches discernment without first teaching the difference between watching over others and taking care of oneself. It is precisely this type of internal recalibration that, the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose, helps to sustain. No longer a compass trapped by the magnet of resentment, but a free compass, pointing towards a purpose that is uniquely yours. This type of access is not available forever. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. In the end, perhaps the justice you so desperately sought was never about the other person receiving what they deserve. Perhaps the only sentence that needed to be given was your own liberation, not because what happened ceased to matter, but because you, finally, stopped being the sole eternal guardian of that process. There is a lighthouse that doesn't chase after ships passing in the distance. It doesn't demand accountability from anyone. It doesn't pursue those who stray. It doesn't watch the horizon waiting for confirmation. It simply illuminates, constantly, silently, for those who wish to find their way back. This is the truest version of his analytical nature, not the one that harbors resentment, waiting for a reckoning that may never come, but the one that illuminates with the same precision as always a path of clarity for himself and for those around him. A lighthouse doesn't grow weaker by ceasing to chase ships that drift away. On the contrary, it is precisely by remaining still, steadfast, faithful to its place, that it manages to guide those who truly need it. Perhaps this is the most silent lesson of this whole story. You never needed to chase after any justice. You only needed to stop wasting your most precious light, illuminating the same point in the past, repeatedly, unnecessarily. The universe never needed you as a prosecutor, judge, or eternal witness to a pain that long ago fulfilled its role of teaching you something. It was simply waiting, with the patience of someone who is in no hurry, for you to remember that you have always been, before anything else, light, and that no light is measured by the size of the darkness it once traversed, but rather by the silent constancy with which it continues to exist, even after everything.